The small crunch of snow underfoot, the whistle of winds as they brushed the top tips of the ears. A slow, winding walk through the woodlands was always her favorite thing. Even something so simple as gathering kindling for the fires transfigured into visions of flourish and adventure. Her hands grew cold and wet as she plucked the twigs from the fresh-fallen mounds of snow. The muscles of her juvenile frame began to stiffen as the sun sank below the tops of the trees. Her drifting thoughts snapped back to reality. Time to go home now. Mother and father are probably missing me, she thought as the sky turned to dusk. The deep purples and greens of sunset were different, hazed even, and there was a growing scent of flame on the air. The usually warm wafts of linden and elm, the sacred wood of her elven kind, were lost against the acridity of roasting flesh. Something was direly and impossibly wrong. On the wings of Airdrie she flew, the sharpness of the air whipping at her lungs as her strides brought her closer to home. The cries of wolves reflected off the hard shells of the trees. They were far off, and their chorus was full of sorrow. What was happening? What had she done? She had wandered too far from home. Much too far. When she arrived, darkness had fallen on her village. Darkness so deep and irrevocable that even the stars refused to give off their light. All around, the homes of her friends and family burned. The mangled corpses of the ones she once knew were laid out, their frames twisted and bereft of life. As the tears welled in her eyes, she saw each of them marked with a ruby slit drawn across their neck. She heard a near beating of hooves in harmony with whipping and chortles of hoarse voices. They were speaking loudly in a tongue that she did not understand, but she recognized one thing, an expression native to all peoples. They were laughing at the slaughter they had wrought. An anger grew in her, a vast and unabated anger. Tears of sorrow became deep channels of hate, etched into the fair skin of her young face. She pulled the small whittler's knife from her belt and dashed towards the source of vile chortling. As she drew closer to them, the figures grew larger in her eyes. They loomed over her, mounted on dark, painted horses, and the butts of their crimson-stained spears dragged against the snow-laden paths. Still, she advanced. Nothing and no one would turn her from her loathing. Her small war cry rang out, cutting through the wall of foreign blather. The helmed heads turned curtly in her direction. She could not see the expression of their faces, but their eyes fixated on her as she approached. They paused as she came closer, until finally the largest of them dismounted, plunging the head of his spear into the frozen earth. She ran up on the hulking figure, slashing at the top of the figure's leg plates, where the hip was exposed just under the breastplate. Her blade found its mark, plunging only just into what she felt to be flesh. The figure never moved, not flinching even once against her blow. Then, the figure jerked, ripping the hilt of the small blade out of her hands. He kicked up his opposite leg, the armored knee making harsh contact with the broad of her cheek. She felt her skin split and her nose dislocate. She sputtered and fell, spitting up dark red blood onto the snow. She tried to rise, but a spiked boot kicked into her chest before she could muster the strength. Then it all went dark. When she woke, the sun was peeking over the horizon. She brushed her fingers against her face. It stung, swollen and near immobile. She scanned her surroundings with the one eye that still had vision. She saw no one, The figures were gone. All that was left was her small knife, stuck mockingly into the ground, and her impenetrable hate.